Let me give myself a BBL. No, my hair, it's not. What the f do I even search up in this situation? I decided to challenge myself and create a 3D model of my persona and an animation within 1 week with zero knowledge of 3D or Blender beforehand. Enjoy my suffering. I wanted to make a low poly model since it seemed like a lot less work, and I decided to use Crashsune's videos throughout this challenge. Not only did it teach how to make a low poly model, but also how to color, rig, and animate it, which was great. I then got immediately stuck because whenever I tried to do a certain shortcut, it would open up my NVIDIA overlay, which I didn't even realize for a few minutes. My Alt-R does something else. What is this? But once I did, I was able to turn it off and the shortcut I was trying to do finally worked. We're already off to a great start. When making a 3D model, you need to already have a reference of the front and side view, maybe a back view too. And some of you may remember from an older video that I already made a turnaround sheet, which was completely useless back then until today. Of course, the reference wasn't perfect. The front view's shoes pointed more at the sides rather than straight on at the camera, and the side view of the hair was a bit of a mess, but it was fine. I wasn't able to make the shoes pointed, and the hair was also a bit of a struggle to model. Despite it being blocky, I wasn't sure how to go about modeling it, and I wasn't even sure if I was doing it correctly. Something I learned on that day, as well as throughout this entire challenge, is that 3D feels a lot more technical than 2D art, because you really have to be creative and proficient with the program you're using to get exactly what you want. But after a few hours, I made some pretty good progress and finally got a good grasp on the shortcuts. But I got pretty tired, so I decided to take a break and come back to it later. Instead of going straight back to the hair, I decided to work on some other areas of the model first. I tried to put a ball joint for the shoulder to resemble a doll, but it didn't work out, so I just ended up extending the arms and torso. After that, I finished up the hair and did the clothes. I wasn't sure if I should model the pants with or without the legs underneath since it's not visible, but I thought that on the off chance that I'd use this model again, I might as well just model both of them in. I also decided to leave the tail for later because I wasn't sure on how to make it or if I even wanted it to be included. I don't know if if these are good pants, but you know what, who cares? It's okay. Look at my polygon ass. Do I make that go like a little bit back? Let me give myself a BBL and then let's move it back a bit. If I back it up, is it fat enough? Overall, the model was practically complete. It wasn't 100% accurate to the reference, but it got pretty close and that was fine by me. I thought the modeling was going to be the hardest part, but I managed to finish it within 2 days, so I was feeling pretty good about myself. I stopped recording, but afterwards I tried to color the model by just changing the base colors, which didn't show up at all in the render. After doing some intense research, I found out pretty quickly that this would be something that take up an entire day and more of my energy, so I decided to leave that all to day 3. I spent almost the entire day learning about UV unwrapping, and it took a while for me to understand what it is. The best way I can explain it as of now is it's when you take an object and mark a seam along the edge as a way to tell Blender that you're cutting the shape from there. So Blender can then take that cut and unwrap the object into a flattened image. This is where you can color or texture your model. And I hate this so much. First off, it was a bit hard for me to, let's just say, unwrap the concept, which I'm willing to chalk down as a skill issue. But secondly, doing this just took a long time, and I wasn't even sure if I was doing it correctly, especially since as far as I could tell from the videos I watched, there isn't really a uniform way of going about it. You just need to figure out what works for you. This is fine. By the end of the day, I had done it, but I wasn't even sure what I was looking at anymore. Even after separating the unwrapping by what color they were supposed to be, the whole thing just felt wrong to look at. At this point, I was very tired and frustrated, so much so that I ranted into my microphone for 5 minutes, turned everything off, and as I was leaving, I saw that my microphone wasn't even connected. My whimsy and joy had been shot down by Blender, and I was filled with seething rage and hatred. I've noticed for a good while now that whenever I'm frustrated, I tend to make a batch of pancakes. I made 2 batches that day. Wow, these pancakes are great and so awesome and great. Did you make these with love? There are 387 million miles of printed circuits and waffle-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal one billionth of the hate I feel for UV unwrapping at this micro instant. For UV hate. So I wasn't doing too great. I initially wanted to do some work in the evening, but I just decided to take the day off and rest. If there's one thing Overwatch taught me, it's that doing anything pissed off never works. This definitely justifies the amount of hours I have on that game. Don't look at that. Look at me. Look at me. At this point, I was starting to accept the fact that there was a good chance I wouldn't finish the challenge, but I was still determined to pull through. I started the day watching more videos to see if there was some other way I could just color onto the model directly without having to use UV unwrapping. If my search had turned out to be fruitless, I'd just use what I had and get it over with. That is when I discovered the wonderful world of vertex painting. Vertex painting is where you can paint directly on the model, specifically from the vertices, the point where 2 edges meet. Not only that, but using this mode in Blender, I was able to fully color a lot of my model with a simple shortcut. But then there was a problem. You'll notice that the arms and pants of my persona have this cloud pattern, which meant that I had to draw them in. But because my model is low poly, I didn't have enough vertices to work with. Now the solution to this will be unsettling, disturbing even, to those who are familiar with this craft. Observe. For those who know nothing about 3D, this is bad. The scope of how bad it really is, I'm not entirely sure myself, but it is definitely bad. Your model is not supposed to have this many edges, especially a low poly one. I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if I woke up tomorrow and saw myself in a Blender cringe compilation. Now you may be tempted to take this witch and burn her at the stake, but let it be known that this method did work. I had fully colored the model, minus the fingers, don't look at those. I had fully colored the model, and I didn't need to do UV unwrapping. So, who's the real winner here? Me. I also consistently had this problem where whenever I rendered the model, the shadows on the hair looked weird and the torso would have a white triangle on it for some reason. This was because I had 2 versions of the hair and torso, and while I did hide them from myself, it didn't get hidden from the camera because that was a different button altogether. So it would still show up in the render and would piss me off a lot. So I was very happy that I got that problem sorted out, colored my model, and I modeled the tail too. Feeling great. Literally, what could go wrong here? The hardest part was finally done, surely. The night was still young and I was still feeling pretty devious and daring, so I decided to try rigging the model as well. Once again, using Crush Sune's videos, I followed the directions to a T, which was long, tiring, and required a lot of back and forth. But problem, I noticed that a lot of the limbs weren't moving correctly or were just glued into place. But I let it slide, thinking that the next video would help, since it was about weight painting, where you basically tell Blender, hey, this part is supposed to move with this part. You'll notice that this is a very simple and probably horrible explanation. The reason for that is because I dropped this very quickly. I did start doing it and was able to make the head move with the neck, which was great, but then I got a little too full of myself and thought, hey, why don't I add some bones to the ears so I can move them around? Just some simple bones to ears. It shouldn't be a problem, and oh my god, why is she jello? After just finishing my battle with UV unwrapping, I wasn't in the mood to tackle this, so I decided to just cut my losses and get rid of the rigs for the ears entirely. And luckily my model was back to normal. Why are you still jello? I have seemed to acquire permanent spine damage. I still do not understand what the hell happened there, and honestly, I don't really care. Blender head falls? What the fuck do I even search up in this situation? No, my hair, it's not. I was tired. I was angry. I was hungry. I was miserable. The day was going so well, and then it all went to shit. Again. But it's okay. I handled this very maturely. I was really considering downsizing the project at this point, but knowing me, I work best when there's a fire right under my ass, so I pulled myself together before I could even think about making another batch of pancakes, and watched more rigging videos. This is where I learned about rigid rigging, where you parent each individual body part to a bone. So instead of assigning a whole arm to 2 bones, I'd cut the arm into 2 and assign each half to its own bone respectively. This would make the limbs move more like Minecraft characters, but I was completely on board with that as it seemed like it fit the low poly look, and I didn't need to do any weight painting with this method. I loaded up an older file, combined the meshes together, and made my own rig, which was a lot easier. I also tried rigging the tail, but only the first bone worked on it, but I was fine with that. I really didn't feel like messing around with the tail or even animating it later. With the rig done, I felt pretty good about my progress and ended the day early to try and get some ideas on what exactly I would animate. The perfect excuse to watch Vine compilations. So not only was this the last day, but I also had plans for that evening. So I was in even more of a time crunch. No pressure. I still didn't know what to animate. There were some vines I wrote down, but they either had some kind of prop or I just wasn't really into it. I decided something more simple and repetitive would be better. Something popular, something I've seen before. Maybe, I don't know, maybe a dance? Specifically, a rat dance. I got the audio, set up the camera, tried importing the video onto Blender to use as a reference, didn't work, and gave up instantly. I decided to just watch the video frame by frame on YouTube, but I ran into a problem. You see, if you look very closely here, easy to miss, but you'll notice that this rat has very rat-like proportions and body, and is also a rat. My character, again, pay attention, my character has very human-like proportions and body, and is not a rat, allegedly. Basically, I needed a more humanoid reference to get a better visual of the key poses, and that's when I remembered that this exists. Perfect excuse to put this video on loop. I went through it frame by frame and scribbled the key poses down on my sketchbook. Very simplistic, maybe even barbaric, but it's all I needed. I also changed the hands because I didn't feel like animating the fingers, so I just turned them into blocks. I did the keyframes and was very surprised to see that I could copy the bones, flip them, and just have the model follow it correctly. I am genuinely so happy that that is a feature. However, I also found out that Blender does not have a built-in onion skin tool, which was genuinely mind-boggling to me. Every animation program I've ever worked with before had that, but I guess I was just spoiled. I tried to find an add-on, but they either costed money or just didn't work for whatever reason. Well, we're doing it like the old 2D animators did it, just flipping frame by frame to just see by eye. No onion skin. Fuck you. No onion skin. Kill yourself if you want an onion skin. I hate Blender so much. So I let my onion skin dreams go and followed the footsteps of the pioneers of animation. I just went back and forth between the keyframes really fast to do the in-betweens, which worked out surprisingly well. Will I ever do this again? Absolutely not. I love my onions. They have layers. Despite the animation being pretty simple, I was really happy that I was finally animating and that it was turning out well. I set up a little room, messed around with the spotlight and camera, exported it, and finally, here is the final result. 1 week of work, folks. 1 week of work, and you may just get yourself something like this. Now, there are a few problems with this. First of all, you'll notice in the reference footage, the arm follows a somewhat circular motion. The arm and hand will stick out in front of the camera, out to the side, and then to the back. I tried having the arm stick out to the side, but it didn't look good. Maybe if I made more adjustments or just worked with 24 frames per second instead of 12, I could have pulled it off, but again, not much time left on the clock, so I did what I could. The dance also had a bit of a jump to it, which I wasn't able to capture either. I think from now on it'd be better to work with 24 frames per second and switch between animating on 1s or 2s depending on the situation. Any higher than that and I will explode. My flat 2D ass can only handle so much. The last thing I also want to point out is the pants. I cut them in half for the rigging, which I don't think I'd ever do again in the future, but I do like how when it splits open, it kind of looks like sharp teeth because of all the subdivisions I did. And honestly, despite the model not being optimal, and the animation being rather primitive, the fact that I was able to do all of this within a week is really cool. I'm happy I was able to do this challenge and finally rip the band-aid off this thing. Now that I have a better idea of how this process goes, I'm really excited to get better at this in the future. I feel like my art 2D-wise is in a pretty good spot, and it's about time that I branched out more. Crash Sune's videos, despite being specifically meant for the character that he was using, were still incredibly helpful, and the explanations were great. I also love the videos made by Doodly and Joey Carlino. They were very useful when I needed to break away and do my own thing. Press Up Studios also had a great video for doing choppy animation. Love that shit. I really hope I can do more 3D animation in the future. I've done 2D animation before, but since it needs more time to check for consistency, proportions, and perspective to stay on model, I don't do it as much as I'd like to. But with 3D, you don't really have to worry about staying on model because you are literally using the model. Obviously, you still need to manipulate the limbs or camera to get some exaggerated poses, expressions, and perspectives, but I think right now I prefer that a lot more. But only time will tell. Now, if you don't mind me, I'm just gonna watch this on loop, kick my feet in the air, and twirl my hair like a little girl. Hope you all have a great day or night wherever you are, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.